Thank you. Sergeant, my name is Julian Murphy. I'm asking you questions for Naja. You might not believe me, but I really do have to be under 20 minutes.
No problem.
Now I'll just proceed chronologically, so from the 6th of November to the 9th. So just starting with your call out to Luana Simmons players. You said in your first recorded interview that Ms. Simmons said something to you like she thought there was an unwritten rule in the community that our clinic staff are off limits for unlawful entries. So that upset her a bit.
Yes, that's right.
Could you just explain what you understood by that? And I know, just for your benefit, you also talked about a no-go zone, off limits in your evidence yesterday. But could you just explain what you meant, what you thought you meant?
That the clinic are there to help the community, and I took that comment from her to mean that she was quite surprised that in her time at Yuendamu that she'd been broken into. She hadn't been broken into before, so she was a bit upset at that and thought that it would never happen to her.
Obviously, break-ins do happen at other people's houses in Yuendamu.
Yes, that's right. Even police houses have been broken into before. Sergeant Frost's house was unlawfully entered not long after she arrived there.
In terms of from a police perspective, I guess you can only speak for yourself, but is it the police view that break-ins at clinic houses are pretty more serious than break-ins at community rooms?
I can't recall too many incidents where a community member has reported a house being broken into, except maybe on 2 or 3 occasions at not Yuendamu but other communities. Generally speaking, it's the from Yuendamu perspective and other communities. Generally speaking, it's the shops and cardio houses, so teachers, nurses.
But even though there are those break-ins at shops and teachers, is there a general understanding that there shouldn't be break-ins at the clinic house, as you understand it from being in communities?
That was Ms. Simon's impression. I mean, it's a bit upsetting for them. They're there to all workers, police, teachers, doctors, nurses, shopkeepers, all there to help the community and to be better. And in particular with Luana, she thought because they're a vital service of health that apart from the violation of her home, but just the fact that being a nurse, she thought she might have been immune to a break-in because that was her first experience in ever, I think.
I just want to move now to, I want to ask you about the attempted arrest on the 6th of November. I'm going to ask a lot of questions about that. But after that, you went back to the house to speak to Lottie Robertson, and that was caught on body-worn camera. Do you recall your conversation with Lottie?
Parts of it, yes. Bits of the conversation, yes.
And just for everyone else's benefit, I'm going to be reading from Exhibit 2 in the trial, which is document number 19057. Do you recall saying something to Lottie Robertson like, so next time he does that, he might get shot? She responds, I know. And you say, in Alice Springs, like, community policemen are different to town policemen. Do you recall saying something like that?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
I think I was asked that question yesterday as well. That they know us, we know them. You know, we have that closer relationship with the community that a police officer in Alice Springs probably wouldn't have, insofar as we see them every day down at the shop, at the clinic, or they're coming to the police station because they need to register a vehicle or get a driver's licence. And with community police officers build up that close relationship with community members, but then with also the how community police officers deal with certain situations on community, whereas if it was an urban environment, you may get a different result. But part of that conversation was to impress upon her the seriousness of what Kumanjayi had done.
Just might ask you just to explain a little bit further that. So you talked about differences between the relationships that community or police officers have with community members and the relationships that town police officers might be able to have. How do those relationships change the likelihood of a police officer shooting a civilian?
That's a difficult question to answer, as it's all depending on that situation and that police officer's experience and what the situation that they're being confronted with.
But you agree, don't you, that in that answer, or in that observation you've made to Lottie Robertson, you're expressing the view that was more likely he would have got shot if it was an Alice Springs police officer? Possibly,
yes. Trying to impress on, and saying to her, you know us, we're community police officers. We do things a different way to what happens in town. And I know there are a lot of differences that you've spoken about, some other differences, but one of those differences is attempting to use less force than might be used in town. Yes. Yeah. Whether you're in a community or in from a personal perspective, whether I'm in Alice Springs, Darwin, or Yuendumu or any other Indigenous community, I'll the force that I'll use to effect an arrest to keep it proportionate to the circumstances that I'm facing. We're just talking about yourself, but in the answer, in the observation you made to Lottie Robertson, you said, like community policemen, different to town policemen. So you were talking generally then, and my question is, do you agree that, generally speaking, appreciating that individuals will differ, your perception is that community police officers are less likely to use force than town police officers? In my experience, yes. And that includes less likely to use lethal force, like firing a gun? Yes. Could I just move to a related topic, which is after the 6th of November attempted arrest, you did one recorded interview on the 14th of November and then a second recorded interview on the 17th of December. Yes. And in the second interview, do you recall being asked, have you received any criticism for the way in which you conducted the attempted arrest on the 6th of November? I remember that question, yes. And it's correct, isn't it, that you had in fact heard, even if it was indirectly, of some criticism of the way in which you'd attempted the arrest on the 6th of November? Yes, indirectly. And albeit indirect, is it correct that that criticism that you'd heard of came from town police officers? Yes. I assume it would have been, yes. And the criticism was to the effect of, and these are your words, probably should have shot him. Yes. Do you know if that criticism was relayed to you
in between the 6th of November attempted arrest, but before the 9th of November fatal incident?
I'd only heard about it post after the shooting, or heard of it. As I said, yes, it was indirect.
Okay. So you heard about it after the shooting, and what did you understand that criticism to mean or to be directed to probably should have shown?
Probably more so that I was justified, their eyes, justified to use lethal force.
But knowing, as you did, well, no, I retract that. I'll just move on, and I think I'll be warned when I've got 5 minutes left, but I think I'm tracking okay. I had a question, just a kind of very quite specific question. Mr. Coleridge asked you yesterday about the decision to request a police dog in the arrest attempt over the 9th to the 10th. And I know that wasn't ultimately, well, as I understand it, not your decision. But Mr. Coleridge asked you about dogs, and you said that, I just want to get it right. I think Mr. Coleridge was referring to Sergeant Frost. What did you say about the dog handler? And you responded, just in our experience, Indigenous people at Yuendamu, I had a dog many years ago, a Rottweiler, and they didn't like my Rottweiler. And then you continued your answer talking about camp dogs, keeper dogs, police dogs. Could I just ask you, when you said there, in our experience, Indigenous people at Yuendamu didn't like dogs like your Rottweiler. When you say didn't like, do you mean they were afraid of them?
Yes.
Okay. And it was that reason that the dog might have been of assistance in the attempted arrest, is that right? Police dogs are good. I'm not a dog handler, a police dog handler, but I'm sure there'll be one giving evidence here that just knowing that they're there are a good deterrent. It's the fear.
Yes.
So, as your understanding, I know you're just speaking to your understanding, it was to use that fear in the arrest. That was the plan for the use of the dog.
To encourage people to stop what they're doing, whether if they want to run from police or if they've armed themselves with a weapon. Again, I can't speak for a dog handler, but I'm led to believe they're very effective, even just sitting in the back of in their police car, in their little cage, and barking, and that can be a very effective deterrent for people to comply.
You've used the word in so you're saying that even just having the dog in the cage on the back of the car, or in the back of the car, can cause people to comply, is that right?
Yes.
And you understand that to be because of those people's fear of the dog?
Yes.
Were you aware that Kumanjayi Walker had been attacked by a police dog prior to?
No, I was not aware of that.
Just got 2 topics left now to ask you about. Yesterday, in answer to questions from Mr. Coleridge at page 562 of the transcript, you were giving an answer about the purpose of the IRT being in community, and the question was, what, if anything, did you understand the IRT were to do until 5:30 in the morning? And you said, so they were to provide some high-profile policing presence on that night, so the night they arrived, just to give the community so high-profile policing is a good way of letting the community know, whether it's an Indigenous community or an urban community, that police are around and available, might quell any disturbances. I mentioned earlier. Is it correct that high-profile policing refers to, I'm not sure if it's a specific term, but it refers to police being in uniform and visible in the community?
High visibility policing, that's another term you could use.
And as you've said there, really the purpose of it is to let the community know, and one of the words you used is that police are around and are available.
Yeah, and to give them some a level of comfort that police are there.
Is that, in your opinion, and I know you're not necessarily always calling the shots or not necessarily in control of it, do you think that purpose of providing comfort, to use the word you've just used, is going to be furthered or really detracted from by those high visibility police carrying long arms like beanbag shotguns and AR-15s?
So, so you're referring to the IRT being armed with other weapons other than our police-issued Glocks?
It could be them or it could be anyone. I mean,
so high visibility policing or high profile policing is could be done a number of ways. Driving around in a police car, getting out of the police car and foot patrol and talking with people, interacting with people, but not a. It's not meant to be a show of force, but to make people aware that police are around. So if they decide they might want to commit some crime, to not commit crime because police are around, and it's not every. Back then, it wasn't every night that police were on duty in Yuendamu. There were some nights where we were, some nights where we weren't, just depending on the roster. So having that extra policing presence is beneficial to keep the community safe.
And you just said it's not meant to be a show of force. Would you agree, though, that if police officers are carrying beanbag shotguns and AR-15s, that would be perceived by any member of the community as a show of force?
Or he's talking carrying around in public or being secreted in a car?
I'm talking about in public and in people's yards.
There's some, that could be, yes.
I'm on to my last topic now, and it's in relation to your experience at the police station after the fatal incident, or after the shooting rather, from the 9th to the 10th. And you've spoken about it in your first recorded interview in particular. And I know you've been asked some questions about it already, so I'll try not to traverse all of the same ground. But you said, and this is at page 26 of that first interview for anyone, when police even injure, let alone shoot, not that I've experienced it before, but I know what's going to happen. I know you know that on these communities they start a riot just over a Facebook post and get angry. Do you recall saying something like that?
Yes.
So you use the words, I know what's going to happen. Is it fair to say that you really use that word know, that your worry about what was going to happen was a really concrete one? This wasn't just a vague possibility, you were really scared about this potential.
Oh yeah, I was very, very concerned about what was going to happen that night.
And you said there that you hadn't experienced it, but is it true that you'd heard or known about police injuring or shooting an Indigenous person in other Indigenous communities?
Only the Wadair reference.
Okay, so just that fear that you've spoken about was primarily based upon what you understood to have happened at Wadair.
Yes.
Um,
And also with what, with my other comment about other disturbances within the community that can be started over a simple Facebook post. So this obviously wasn't a Facebook post. It was an Indigenous man being shot by police. So that's what I meant by that.
Just when you refer to those other disturbances, though, do you agree that when you're referring to your knowledge of those, that's referring to disturbances between groups or individuals in the community?
Yes, that's right.
Rather than directed to the police?
Yes.
So, what made you think that, if you can articulate, what made you think or fear that what had happened 20 years ago and hundreds of kilometres away in Wadair was a good predictor of what happened in Yunduru?
Well, obviously taking that into account, but with my reference to the Facebook posts and even my other dealings at Yuendamu when they are unhappy with police, they get extremely angry. I've even seen it where a police officer unwittingly ran over someone's pet dog, and a group of people came to the police station, and this is in the 90s, and were very angry, understandably, because their pet dog had been run over. But in that instance, a couple of people armed themselves with weapons. So my point that I'm getting at is that the level of violence sometimes used on communities, which has occurred in the past, that's what I was worried about.
I'm nearly finished, Sergeant. And it was incidents like that one you've referred to with the dog, and I guess more seriously in Wadair, that led you to the fear that community members might, and I'm quoting parts of your interview, quote, storm the police station and go for firearms, end quote, our lives were in danger, and this isn't a quote, but to the effect that someone might drive a car through the front doors of the police station.
Yes, so as I explained before, the concern was that members of the community would seek cultural payback on the police. Not saying that all of the community had that mindset, but we need to be mindful that that is part of their culture, traditional payback, and if there's a mixture of the anger and tension, and if there's some alcohol that is being consumed, then sometimes that does get out of hand.
You had no information that alcohol had been consumed that night?
No, but during funerals, there is a tendency for alcohol to come to a community. Just like when you or I go to a funeral, afterwards there'll be a wake, and there'll be alcohol consumed there, and it's no different in Indigenous communities. Some people might like to consume alcohol after the funeral.
My last question was about cultural payback, something that you mentioned today. You understand cultural payback to be a part of traditional Warlpiri culture,
Yes.
and you understand it to be quite a formal, organised process.
Not all the time, Your Honour.
But, according to traditional culture.
If it's traditional, then yes, but many times it's not traditional, where people have consumed alcohol, and the payback is not sanctioned, for want of a better term, by communities, and that's how people end up being seriously hurt and killed.
Just sticking with traditionally at the moment, but I understand your qualification. Do you also understand that traditionally it's a restorative process, not a revenge process per se?
Yes and no. A lot of it is, especially when the alcohol is involved, probably more revenge than a restorative thing.
Sure, but when it's done traditionally, according to traditional law and culture, not lots of alcohol, do you understand it to be restorative but not revenge?
It's supposed to be, yes.
So then, just referring to, if I can call it, this fear of a distorted form of alcohol influence payback, that's what you feared on that night, is that right?
Yes.
Are you aware of Warlpiri people ever in the past meting out, and that word meeting is a word that you used earlier, meting out cultural payback on a police officer previously in Yuendamu?
Not cultural payback, but because in my experience on Yuendamu and other communities, I haven't been part of a police shooting before, but at a lower level, not payback, but more so kicking that police officer out of the community if they thought they were disrespectful to community members.
That's something very different to what you say you feared on this night, which is people storming the police station.
That's right, because someone had been shot and killed.
My final question then is, you agree, don't you, that you had this fear of community members, a mob of community members? That word mobs used, it was used by you today, it's used in the statement.
Yes.
You agree that you were scared of a mob of community members potentially driving through the doors of the police station, storming the police station and going for firearms? You agree that's what you were afraid of?
That was a concern, yes, as one of many.
Do you agree, though, that never in Australian history have a mob of Indigenous people ever driven through the doors of a police station and got their hands on the firearms within the police station? To your knowledge.
I haven't studied it.
To your knowledge.
Oh, to my knowledge, no.
Those are the questions you have.
Any other questions, Mr. Officer?
Yes, thank you. Sergeant, my name is Luke Robertson and I principal Zachary Rolfe. Can I just start with a couple of brief propositions for your view? Firstly, as a police officer, when you're trying to, or potentially effecting an arrest, information and intelligence is crucial to the performance of your duties when trying to effect an arrest. Did you agree with that?
Yes.
And intelligence can be a range of things as to where someone is, for example, an offender, potential offender.
Yes.
And logically, you can't go and arrest someone unless you know where they are or have some information as to where they are as an example.
Yes.
Or a form of information. Second proposition then, can I just ask you, is that every arrest is different.
Yes.
And there is certainly, in some arrests, a level of unpredictability.
Yes.
For example, what happened on the 6th of November was unpredictable.
Yes.
Just turning to the 6th of November and briefly looking at your evidence from yesterday, at around 5:45 p.m. you received information about the unlawful entry at Luana's house.
Yes, that's correct.
And you attend with Senior Constable Smith.
Yes.
And you start undertaking tasks with respect to fingerprint analysis, for example, and responding to that unlawful entry.
Yes.
And by 6:25 p.m, you and then Senior Constable Smith had made a decision to go to House 577.
Yes, that's correct.
And that was on the back of information or intelligence that Senior Constable Smith had received from a community source that Kumanjayi Walker was in the community.
That's correct, yes.
And that's information or intelligence you have fresh to hand.
Senior Constable Smith did, yes.
Yes, and he passed it on to you.
Yes, that's right.
And based on that intelligence and that information, so can I withdraw that, were you close by to House 577 at the time you received that information?
Relatively close. 577, I think, is at West Camp.
Yes.
And Luana's, if you've been to Yuendamu, Luana's house is near the morgue.
And indeed, Senior Constable Smith had been approved for overtime by the time you get to 577.
Well, so I think it was before he got to assist with the unlawful entry and any other inquiries we needed to conduct.
Sure. And other intelligence or information you had was that from Senior Constable Smith that he knew Kumanjayi well.
Yes.
That he was a prolific property offender.
Yes.
And in your words, known to be a ringleader in relation to the unlawful entries.
Yes.
That's all information. You would classify those as intelligence and information.
Yes.
And so you decide to attend. This court has heard evidence from the elder, Mr. Williams, that information can't be kept secret in the community. It spreads like wildfire. Do you agree with that?
That's probably true, yes.
In fact, your words yesterday were that there was a risk that elders would tip family members off about police trying to arrest.
Yes, that's correct.
So when you receive information or intelligence, as Senior Constable Smith here had, in relation to a community source that Kumanjayi was in the community, and in your evidence earlier to my friends, knowing his criminal history, knowing the fact he might have been a ringleader and knowing the fact that he had a warrant out for his arrest, that was information and intelligence you acted on there and then.
That's right.
Because there's a risk that that community source could have relayed the information that he'd tipped police off back to the community.
Definitely, yes.
You then attend at House 577 and the door is open.
Yes.
And Senior Constable Smith actually enters into the house first before you.
Yes.
And you come across a person you know to be Ethan Robertson.
Yes, that's correct.
And Ethan points to the back of the house. You then knock on the door. You don't knock the door down.
Senior Constable Smith knocked on the door.
Smith knocks
Yes.
on the door. And it turns out your intelligence or information was correct. You came across Kumanjayi Walker.
That's correct, yes.
Now, I'm not going to go through a blow by blow account as to what followed there. Can I just ask, in the sense of your decision not to discharge your firearm, a couple of things. You used the expression in your evidence yesterday that the raising of the axe, and certainly in previous experiences, the utilisation of a weapon is sometimes a show of force.
Yes, in my experience.
And they do it to show that force to their family.
And to police, yes.
And to police. And I think you even used the term that they brandish weapons.
Yes, that's a bit of a police speak.
Sure. But would you agree that the brandishing of a weapon is vastly different to the actual deployment of the weapon on a person?
Yes.
So in this case, you weren't struck with the axe.
That's correct, no.
Were you struck at all by Kumanjayi?
No.
You said that you reached out to his right hand with your left hand, but you didn't bear hug him.
Sorry, no. So when he was in the doorway, grabbed his left arm, and the axe was in his right hand.
But then you let go.
Yes, that's right.
You certainly didn't wrestle with him.
No.
You didn't wrestle him to the ground.
No.
Your partner, Senior Constable Smith, didn't wrestle him to the ground.
No.
In fact, he drops the weapon and he absconds.
Yes.
And so that's a scenario where he has displayed a show of force.
Yes.
By the use of a weapon.
Yes.
It hasn't physically deployed it against you or your partner by physically deploying it hit you or struck you.
That's correct, yes.
Now turn to the 9th of November, and this is the time in which you're preparing your statement. And as I understand your evidence, that the information you had was from a verbal conversation with Sergeant Frost about an arrest at 5:30 in the morning?
Yes.
You hadn't read the email that was circulated with the so-called arrest plan, had you?
No, but I knew of it.
Knew of it. Because inserted in your statement on the 14th of November, you refer to information about an email that you hadn't read.
Yes, that's right.
And in your conversations with Sergeant Frost about the discussion of an arrest at 5 a.m, was it ever expressed in terms that it was a preference as opposed to a mandate, so that those at Yuendamu, yourself and Sergeant Frost, could get some rest?
The early morning arrest was the option to capture, get Kumanjayi by surprise, take him by surprise. So preferred and mandated. Mandated means you can't do anything else. If they were to see him if they were to see Kumanjayi in the street going to the shop, then of course they should arrest him. You don't just let that person go.
Yes, so you use the word optional.
With regards to what, sorry?
Your answer just then when I asked, was it expressed in terms that the arrest at 5 a.m. was a preference so you could get rest?
Well, that was the not so much to for us to obtain rest, but for the safe arrest of the safest possible way to catch Kumanjayi by surprise was the 5:30 arrest.
Yes, but you agree that it was optional. That's what word you used before. Optional.
Yes, unless they saw him walking up the street.
Exactly. Mm. And are you aware that Sergeant Frost had said to those members of the IRT, including Constable Rolfe, if you did come across him, arrest him?
Yes. That would be you. I would expect any police officer to say that.
So, on the 6th of November, when you, Senior Constable Smith, had received intelligence that Kumanjayi was in the community,
yes,
and Senior Constable Smith knew he was at 577, and you attended to effect an arrest, you so happened to come across him and attempted to effect an arrest.
Exactly.
And in fact, you said in your statement on the 14th of November about your involvement in the briefing that you kept yourself out of it.
Yes, correct.
And what you did, and this is to Donaldson, the dog handler, as well as the IRT, is you pointed to some locations on a map as to where he might be.
Just 577 and where he ran.
Just 577 and
yes.
Where he ran. So there's certainly, except for that relationship between House 577 and the axe incident, you didn't know, and can I suggest no one else knew, exactly where Kumanjayi was at that time.
No, but that was the most likely place he would be, as that's where Senior Constable Smith and I first went. As he said, that's the most likely place he's going to be because that's where his family is and his girlfriend Rakisha.
Yes, because you say at page 25 of your statement on the 14th of November, shortly after saying you think the plan was for Alafeo to start at 5 o'clock the next day, once they had intel that he was still in the community, Because at this stage, we didn't know he was still in the community.
That's correct.
That's 3 days later after the accident.
Yes.
And you later say, when the IRT depart, this is about point 5 of the page of 25, so I assume that they went out to arrest him or to find him or to gather intelligence, as they said. That's when the IRT depart, do you agree?
Yes.
So, going back to my earlier proposition, at the start of my cross-examination, if you don't know where someone is, but you're sent to arrest them, you need to find out firstly where they might be.
Potentially, yes.
And if you come across some information, fresh information as to where they might be, for example, in a particular house, bearing in mind what you said about sometimes information can be spread by others and there can be a tip-off,
Yes.
you act on that information, that intelligence you have at the time, don't you?
Yes.
Because to return at that point in time, and perhaps ideally go and effect an arrest at 5 a.m. the next morning, the offender could have absconded from the community altogether.
Potentially, yes.
In fact, do you recall that I think some of the IRT members, if not all, had bought swags that you were in the police station?
Yes. I think that was a directive.
Yes. So they're certainly anticipating the possibility of still being there overnight if they hadn't located Kumanjayi earlier.
Yes.
Do you agree? Were you ever aware of any instruction in your discussions with Sergeant Frost about the use of long arms?
No. It's not working on a community, it's not a preferred option to be wandering around a community with a long arm unless you're dealing with an offender who's armed with a gun themselves, and that's any would take that to be anywhere in the Northern Territory.
Were you aware of any instruction by Sergeant Frost to either you or others, and by others I mean Alafeo, that they were to stay at the police station and weren't to assist in the arrest?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Were you ever aware of instruction by Sergeant Frost that you or Alafeo or even Senior Constable Smith were not to assist in the arrest but were to stay at the police station?
I don't know that that's I think you need to break that up into the individuals.
Yes, sure, Your Honour. Were you ever told by Sergeant Frost that you were to remain at the Uendamu police station and assist once Kumanjayi had been arrested?
At what point in time?
On the 9th of November 2019.
No, I don't
Do you
recall
mean
that.
Evening, or do you mean at 5:30 a.m.?
It's a simple proposition.
I'm just asking you to
And
clarify.
I'll ask the next question.
Your Honour, the objection is there are two relevant points in time. There is the evening of the 9th of November, and then there are the events, or what might have been the events of the morning of the 10th of November. If there is a question about one or the other, the question should be put directly, but it is unfair to put it in a vague way.
Well, I think he's asking if there was any instruction on the 9th of November, and it could relate to either of those time periods. So I think he's allowed to ask that question, and if there's a positive answer, then maybe it needs to be clarified further. Yes, Mr. Officer.
Thank you. Sergeant, were you ever instructed to remain at the Uendamu police station and assist once Kumanjayi had been arrested?
No.
Were you ever informed or instructed that had there been no arrest on the night of the 9th of November, but certainly one the next morning, that is when you might accompany the IRT?
Accompanying them where?
To arrest in the morning. If there wasn't an arrest on the night of the 9th of November,
I wasn't to be part of any arrest, and I made that clear to Sergeant Frost.
were you aware if that instruction was given to any other member of the Uendamu police station?
I didn't hear any conversation, but that was the purpose of extra resources being in Yuendamu, because Senior Constable Smith was in Alice Springs on roster day off, and Constable Weathers wasn't in the community, and with the fatigue issues that were raised yesterday, that just left myself and Sergeant Frost there, and with my telling her that I didn't want to be part of the arrest, that required the resources from Alice Springs.
Because there's been a significant escalation in Kumanjayi's conduct on the 6th of November, hasn't there?
As opposed to what?
Well, there's been a significant escalation in his conduct towards police officers on the 6th of November,
Yes.
running at you with an axe.
Yes.
And so an arrest or an apprehension of Kumanjayi was imperative, if you agree.
Yes.
And certainly did you view it as imminent, and is that why you were preparing your statement at the police station in relation to the 6th of November 2019 incident?
I was preparing my statement, so once the arrest was done, that at 5:30 the next day, that the bulk of the prosecution file was completed, and then if there was if Kumanjayi was remanded into custody, then there would be sufficient evidence on the file to get him remanded and for it to be heard in Alice Springs.
Or indeed, if they came across him when they departed the police station at 7:05 p.m. and so happened to arrest him because they did come across him. Is that also?
That's a possibility, yes. And I didn't. I think I was going to have the following day off as well, get some rest. So.
Thank you, Your Honour. No questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes,
Yes, Your
Mr. Hutton.
I'm Sergeant, my name's Tom Hutton, IP from Care Health.
Yes.
I too want to ask you some questions about the events in Yuendamu commencing on 6 November 2019. And when you attended the unlawful entry at Luana Simons' house on the afternoon of 6 November, did you observe any damage to the house?
From what I can remember, the security screens over the windows, particularly the kitchen window, which, if I remember, was the point of entry, that had been removed or partially removed. And I also noted there were some holes in the cement sheeting on the eaves, but I wasn't able to determine whether they were done as a result of that unlawful entry, or if that was from another previous incident or from previous tenant.
The promise report in the Coronial brief indicates you considered at the time that the offenders had first attempted to gain access by smashing a hole in the gyprock roof.
Okay, that clears that up then. Yep.
But they hadn't gained access that way. They had gotten in through the window, as you understood.
Yes, and I located a latent fingerprint on the inside of the window frame.
And in your statement, you said that they had done that by using shovels and that sort of stuff that were found nearby.
Yes, garden implements.
Can you recall what else now, if anything, you found in addition to shovels?
I can't remember, sorry.
No trouble. Did you enter the liner's accommodation?
Yes, we did.
What did you observe inside?
There were several people inside, Luana, her husband, and a couple of other people. I think one of them was a nurse. And from memory, there was a bit of a mess. And Luana, as I said before, she was pretty upset.
Am I right to say that a number of drawers have been pulled out and possessions have been thrown around the premises?
Yes.
You described in your statement that Luana was upset, and you confirmed that during your oral evidence as well.
Yes.
You're asked by Mr. Murphy some questions a little bit earlier about your conversation with Luana, and your evidence was she had suggested to you that the health accommodation was something of a no-go zone.
That was her impression, and that's what she conveyed to me, yes.
Senior Constable Smith was also asked questions during his evidence about the conversation with Luana, and he also described her as distressed, but the reason that he gave for that was quite different to yours, and it was that there had been a number of break-ins to health accommodation in the preceding few weeks.
Okay. Oh, I wasn't aware of that because I'd only been there for a few days prior to that
Sure.
unlawful entry.
Do you recall hearing that conversation with Luana that Senior Constable Smith gave evidence in relation to?
No, I don't.
All right. Do you recall when the results of the fingerprints that were obtained from Luana's property were returned?
No, I don't know that. I had gone to, I'd taken, after the shooting incident, I'd taken some time off, and an instruction was given for another police officer to take carriage of that matter.
Understood. Do you expect that they were returned after the shooting incident?
Yes, they wouldn't have been, my experience wouldn't have been before.
Thank you. And you also took photographs at Luana's premises?
Yes, I did.
Could the witness, Beck, please be shown tab 122A in the brief? The name of it, I'm not sure. It's at 122A. Presumably photographs will be in there. Scroll down back, please. Are these the photographs you took, Sergeant?
Yes.
And I think in the first photograph, which we've gone past, you can observe the damage to the gyprock roof. If you don't.
Yeah, I remember that now, yes.
And that had been done with the shovel, presumably.
Oh, couldn't say. Possibly. Could have been done with something else.
We heard evidence yesterday from Senior Constable Smith that at times police would give advice to community members on securing their premises appropriately.
Yes, so any unlawful entry, whether that's in an Indigenous community or here in Alice Springs, don't want to tell them how to suck eggs, but try and offer some advice about what we call target hardening your house, but also some friendly advice about just ensuring your car, lock your cars and lock houses, that sort of thing, lock your doors. But just offering advice and asking them if they have any questions for us about security issues that they might have.
Thank you. Did you observe any difficulties in the way that Luana was locking up her house, or did she need any advice?
Not that I can remember. It was from memory. The premises was locked, hence why the offenders went through prized off the security screens.
Thank you. You worked the following day on the 7th of November?
Yes, I did.
Are you aware that the personal car belonging to Luana had its windows and back windscreen smashed?
No, I'm not aware of that.
You didn't attend?
No.
To that incident? Okay. Moving then to the 8th of November, you've given evidence that you were on call that evening.
Yes.
And I understand the second job that you responded to was at the nurse accommodation again, and it was prompted by a call from Nurse Vanessa Watts. And
Yes.
it involved the accommodation of Luana.
Yes.
you gave evidence yesterday that you were able to observe that people had tried unsuccessfully to enter the premises.
Yes.
And how were you able to observe that they had tried?
Judging by Ms. Watts's complaint over the telephone that was recorded, and in talking to her, that she could hear some banging, and she suggested that they were trying to, it sounded to her that they were trying to break in using garden implements.
Did you find weapons or garden implements at the house when you attended?
I think there was a pick or a mattock with the handle broken.
Did you find anything else?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay. Did you take any photographs of those? Do you recall?
No, I didn't.
All right. In your statement, you suggest that Sergeant Frost spoke with Vanessa that evening when you attended.
Yes.
Did you speak with Vanessa?
I can't remember, but Sergeant Frost was doing most of the talking with the complainant, with Miss Watts.
Did you speak with another nurse, Matilda Starbuck, who I also understand is present?
I may have, but I can't remember.
All right. You then inspected, after leaving Lina's accommodation, you then inspected Janine Rawicker's vehicle, a red Jeep, which had its back windscreen.
I don't know who owned the vehicle, but as part of our response to that incident, I went up and down the street just to see if anything else had occurred, or if there was anyone hiding in bushes or anything like that, and that's when I located the red Jeep with the rear window smashed.
And you took one photograph of that?
Yes.
And could the witness please be shown tab 124A? That's the photograph you took, Simon?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And am I correct to say that after observing Janine's vehicle, or the red Jeep, you then observed that the clinic car had its back open and first aid kit had been strewn around? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Am I correct to say that it also had a window smashed?
I don't remember a window being smashed on that car, no.
Can I take you perhaps to page 20 of your statement, which is at tab 752, and I can read you the paragraph if this would assist, but you say first aid equipment was strewn around the yard, so not although the car window was smashed, no houses were broken into, and it was disappointing that the window was smashed, but that was clearly by a rock or someone of the weapons that they had to break into the house.
Yes, I was making reference to the red Jeep.
You don't believe the clinic car also had a window smashed?
I don't recall that, no.
All right. Did you attend any further call-outs to health accommodation that evening?
No.
Are you aware that there were other incidents involving the health accommodation that night?
No, I'm not aware of that. We're at the Uluru community responding to a domestic violence incident.
Right. Can I move then to the events of 9 November?
Yes.
On page 28 of your statement, you state this is after Kumanjayi has been transported to the police station and CPR is being performed.
Yes.
And there's on page 28 of that statement, you say, I do distinctly remember the information that was disseminated that they were all aware that there was no clinic at that time.
Yes.
when you're referring to they, who are you referring to as they?
Sorry, could you repeat the paragraph?
Sure. You say, I do distinctly remember in all the information that was disseminated that they were all aware that there was no clinic at the time.
Oh, the members from Alice Springs, the IRT and the dog and Constable Alafeo as well.
Thank you. Council Assisting asked you questions this morning regarding the running sheet that you prepared, and that's it. The annexure to the statement at tab 752. Could I ask that please be put on the screen as well?
Sorry, what? 752 back.
Sorry.
Attachment 1.
Perhaps I can ask you the question, Sergeant, while that's coming up. There's an entry in that running sheet at 10:45 p.m. It says a handful of police left for the airstrip, and they were accompanied by the 2 nurses from Yoloma.
Yes.
And the running sheet, which is on its way, I think, then records at 11 p.m. That party returned from the airstrip. If you just wouldn't mind scrolling down, please, back.
23.
Just that's great. So we see the 2245 entry and the 2300 entry.
Yes.
So that exercise took 15 minutes to complete.
Yes.
And you note in your running sheet that when they returned, one of the nurses had been injured.
Yes.
Can you tell the court what injuries she had sustained?
I can't remember who it was, whether it was the driver or the passenger, but I was told a rock was thrown through the window and struck the nurse in the head, and she had a cut to her forehead temple area.
Do you recall whether she also had bruising to the arm and?
I don't remember that, no.
All right. And did you observe the damage that had been done to the ambulance from your end, either that evening or the following day?
Yes, I can't remember when. I think it was the following day, the broken window.
All right. You gave evidence earlier that some photographs were taken of the damage to the ambulance. I might ask that the witness first be shown the photographs that were taken by Officer Rate, which I think were the last. Perhaps if we could just scroll through these. Thank you. Are those photographs consistent with what you recall of the damage to the ambulance and the injuries to the development house?
Yes.
Thank you. There are further photographs. I might, for expediency, we won't proceed to those. Thank you. Just a couple of further questions, Sergeant. In your running sheet at 11:26 p.m, it's noted that a phone call was received from Ashley Jansen at Whiteack, stating that the clinic had been set on fire.
Yes.
Did you receive that phone call?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall what Ashley Jansen told you?
I think he said not the actual building, but some grass was set on fire. I think that's what he said.
Right. And a decision was made not to attend because there was no one in the clinic. Is that correct?
Yes, and from what I can remember, there was none of the structure was on fire. Then they would have contacted us back again if there was a further escalation of that fire, if the fire got out of control.
Did you work on the Monday following? I know you've given evidence that you took some time off after the incident.
No, I left on the Sunday.
Are you aware of whether or not, or have you been informed that there were further break-ins to the nursing accommodation?
No, I was not aware of that.
Thank you.
And at the time, we need to take the lunch. Who else has questions?
I have 2 minutes of questions, which I can do after lunch or now.
Is Mr. Friddleton?
Yes, I've got a few minutes.
All right, then we'll come back after lunch.
Before we rise, I'm not going to earn myself any friends. Could I propose that we take a shorter lunch today? We would like very much to finish the next witness, if that is possible.
Sure. Are we able to come back at 1:45?
Your Honour, may I indicate that I have no questions for Alf Bayo?
Thanks, Mr. Bowe.
But
Breathes us over.
but I have raised with
Not
Councillor...
putting any pressure
No,
on
no,
you.
I understand. But I have raised with Councillor Assisting one omission in relation to this witness, which will take 2 minutes, and I understand it's not opposed. It's just a document I need to take this witness to.
Sure.
I'm happy to do...
Then we'll take lunch and we'll come back at 1:45.
Yes. Your Honour, could the witness be shown item 7145, pages 27 to 28. It's an annexure to Travis Worth's statement of the 20th of August 2020. 7145. It's 27 to 28. It's 3 emails. Sergeant, so you can get a context whilst the document's coming up. It's an email exchange that you had with Travis Hurst around 11:52 a.m. on Thursday, the 7th of November. You'll see up the top there. If you could scroll down a bit, please, back, and you'll see the original email. You'll see there that what looks like that Worst has been informed of some information by Bradley Curry, and in response to that, he seemed to be making a welfare check upon you.
Yes.
He asked, are you all right? It's the next sentence I'm interested in and your response to it. He says, I see the Walpries with the surname of Walker are still ours and my nemesis. You see that?
Yes.
And if you scroll up, please, you'll see your response is to that aspect of it. The same family names keep popping up, just the younger ones now. The people we dealt with are too old to fight us. You see that exchange?
Yes.
Could I just please get a sense of what did you understand he was trying to communicate to you, by his reference to Walkeries in that way?
You'd have to ask him that.
Well, what did you understand in order to respond as you did?
That when I was at Yuendamu with him, we had some arrests with people that there's obviously particular family names at Yuendamu, and that's why I refer to the family names popping up.
Okay, what did you understand the word nemesis mean? Enemy?
Possibly.
And in response, you were referring to an event of some kind by elder people in the Walker family. Is that what you're talking about? The people we dealt with are too old to fight?
All the previous, so 20 years ago, the previous people that we dealt with that were young men back then, they're too old.
Right, but he was saying to you, they are still your and his enemies.
Well, I that was his words, not mine.
Okay, and to be fair, in response, in the penultimate paragraph, you point out to him to contextualise what, in fact, you felt from the interaction. When you said, I don't think he wanted to chop us up, etc.
Yes.
You were trying to let him know that, A, you're okay, and to give him some sense of what the dynamic was that you faced.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
We'll return for the